Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all.
Real estate experiment. What is happening, y'all? Today I was just talking about this offline. I got Nick Hutchison with me from BookThinkers. He is the co-founder of BookThinkers. And we're overdue, man. Welcome to the lab, brother.
Yeah, thank you so much. We've traded so many messages back and forth for a while now. I don't know, maybe about a year. And so I'm excited to be on and chop it up.
Absolutely. And when he says that, guys, if you're tuning in, whether you're driving, listening to this, it's really Nick's been over delivering in value without needing to. I reached out to him. We've been kind of going back and forth, and he's just dropping me audios. And now I'm not saying he's going to do that for you, but I'm just saying my appreciation is out to Nick because, again, that's why we connected. Same core values. In the lab, we love to learn from practitioners. Nick is a practitioner himself. We're very excited to hear. I'll just level set a little bit. Look, Nick, we do our homework. You've literally been able to, what started out as working with your, which I believe is your dorm, your dorm mate at the time, which was, I believe his name is Alec, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You guys were always bouncing ideas off one another, which is how it starts, the mastermind, Think and Grow Rich. I'm so glad you talked about that. I want to hear a little bit more, but essentially, you guys were bouncing ideas off one another, and now you've created one, which I believe is one of the most dominant platforms when it comes to education and being able to kind of let people in on the gems of what books they should be reading or they should consider reading and what kind of values and gems they should get from it. And then a big shout out to your new podcast. One of the reasons that I gave you a shout out was because I'm like, man, you're crushing it with the guests, and it all comes from having something to offer and being of value to the marketplace. And obviously folks who have books being able to use your platform to display them. So I'm so happy to have you in the lab. Before we talk about the brand and all the books that you got, I want to talk about the man behind everything, Nick. Who was Nick before, man? Tell us a little bit about that. And again, welcome.
Sure. Well, again, thank you so much. Love the introduction. My name is Nick Hutchison. As you mentioned, I live in Boston, Massachusetts, but I've kind of lived all over. And I'm 26 years old. I'm a former sales professional turned entrepreneur, a little bit of real estate. It's my investment vehicle of choice. So happy to talk about that as well. And I'm the book guy. BookThinkers has been my life now for a couple of years, and I've really spent a lot of time reading amazing personal development books and condensing decades of information into days, and then really into takeaways that other people can use through Instagram and other social media platforms. And like you said, we've got the podcast going on now, but I love travel. That's probably my number one thing outside of reading. I love traveling internationally. I love traveling domestically. I love meeting new people and learning about different cultures. I love embracing discomfort intentionally in any way that I can and consistently growing as a human being. I like to say that I'm a student of the world. I'm willing to learn from just about anybody. And also, birds of a feather flock together. That's why I think the two of us have very similar energy. And when I saw you did a couple book reviews early on and tagged me, and I said, I love this guy.
I tagged you because I was inspired, and that's why you're here. And no, totally, man. And look, we're gonna get right into it. And thank you for that, for coming in and kind of giving us your background. Definitely check out the Smart Retention app as well, which we'll also plug because you're doing a lot of stuff, and which is really fascinating. But one thing I noticed as you're speaking, you said, I do a little bit of real estate and I love to travel. So I wanted to anchor those 2 points right there, man, because you are in the real estate space. The pink matter that we have between our 2 ears is the most important asset in real estate that you can invest in, right? So that's why I want to have you in here first, because, we have a lot of individuals coming here. It doesn't matter how many their portfolios, how large their business is, but it all starts in here. And so I think that's why it's really important for us to talk about, how you're inspired and how you got started and how you actually start using these as, as kind of mentorship in books. And another keyword that you said, Nick, and I don't know if you're realizing this, I'm putting it together for us because you're literally an experimenter. You said travel, you love to travel. And that's essentially what you're doing with your brain. You're traveling. Your books are bringing you to new places, new paradigm shifts that you've never really realized before. So I'm kind of just tying the two together. But so you're in the real estate space. I'm giving you that badge. You are. Don't say a little bit. It's a lot of bit, and it's the most important one. So I'm fascinated about that, Nick. And then traveling. So at what point did your brain start traveling to new places with books? And kind of tell us a little bit about that. I know you started to get into it.
Yeah, I really didn't start until the end of college. And so I went to the University of New Hampshire and I have a degree in marketing, business administration with a focus in marketing. And throughout all of my middle school, high school, and college experience, I was almost anti-book. I was a pretty bad student. I wasn't very attentive in class. I like to have fun and socialize a little bit, but I still wasn't even great at that. And so in general, I think I was operating from a place of insecurity and ego for a while there. And then towards the end of my college experience, I took an internship at a software company, and it was a sales role. And one of my mentors early on had a couple book recommendations. And so I jumped into those. The first was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And that was the first aha moment where, using that term that I used earlier, condensing decades into days, I was able to take 30 or 40 years of somebody's life experience and filter that down into some action that I could take immediately and some perspective changes or paradigm shifts that I could implement. And so that's really what happened. It was about, at the age of 20 or 21. And it was through those first couple books, and they really hit home for me. And when I look back, I think in hindsight, there's a very clear inflection point as far as my capacity to learn, as well as my desire to become more educated. And it was those couple books. That's what did it for me.
That's crazy, man. It's funny. Again with the real estate thing, it's so funny because we have so many people in our community, and I know you know this, right? Even the Bigger Pockets community, like when people come on our podcast as well, because we have, again, a lot of real estate investors, that's our niche. Rich Dad, Poor Dad was the book that did it, and I think it's just such a fundamental core. I think that the storytelling and the lessons behind it, I think, is what's fascinating. I guess, what did you get from that? Just, I guess, at a high level, what do you think kind of like flipped that switch for you when you were reading that? And I was like, oh, okay.
Well, I've read it. So I've read it probably 3 or 4 times now, but that initial time was a very interesting experience, because I think towards the end of your college experience, if you're really unsure about what you want to do in life, then money can be a very scary thing. You don't know how to earn it. You don't know how to invest it. You don't know how to take care of it. You're coming out of college with a lot of debt in an average scenario like I was. And so I think I had a lot of insecurity around money. And for me, the first time I read that book, it helped me understand cash flow. And it helped me understand a little bit about how you can make money and how you can use that money to make yourself more money. And, learning some of the basic definitions in that book was very calming for me. And I thought, okay, I had this area of my life that was full of anxiety. Whenever friends brought up all the money they were going to make after school, like, I was pretty timid in those conversations because I just didn't get how it worked. Nobody ever taught me in school how money worked. It's only taught in the home. And if that's not a calming conversation you're having with your parents, you're not going to get educated in that way. And so that's what it did for me. It relieved anxiety. It helped me become more educated and part of the conversation. I was a business student that didn't know anything about how the world worked as far as money. Yeah. And so that's what it did for me. And the other thing that happened, there's kind of 2 themes here. That's the first theme. The other thing that happened is I realized, wow, I can apply that to every other area of my life. Yeah. If I have an insecurity or a big question mark, maybe it's not a YouTube video or a classroom or asking friends about it. Maybe it's picking up a good book. And so that became a very big theme, and that kind of snowballed in my life.
So interesting you said that. And let's anchor this point home again, because I think it's important. So I think, look, I've never really been into, and I think I should consider maybe reading more like novels. I've been really deep into personal development, but I think the reason why is because I'm always reading with like a purpose. Like, I'm trying to, like, it's either something I don't know or something I'm trying to figure out. What do you have to say? Because you read a lot of books, I'm sure. Is your library primarily, hey, I'm interested about how I should deal with stress, therefore let me read about it, fix a problem? And what would you say to someone if they're thinking like, what kind of books should I be reading? Because I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, it's a very popular question that I get all the time. And so I think there's a couple different ways to answer it. The very clear one is like we're talking about. If you have a desired skill that you'd like to be better at or that you'd like to acquire, then there are probably some books that can help you get there. And so I always tell people around the beginning of each year, okay, it's about to be 2021. By the end of 2021, who do you want to be? What are the differences between where you are now and where you want to be? Are there some skill gaps? If there are, let's talk about what are the best books that can help cover that gap for you. And so that's one way to think about it. The other really popular answer that I give to that question is, who do you want to be like? Are there icons of industry that you aspire to learn more about, that you aspire to be, that you aspire to emulate? Let's just say that you want to be extremely inventive and creative and innovative. Okay, well, that's Steve Jobs. There are a couple really, really thorough books about Steve Jobs. And if you read those books, number one, you'll be super interested. So you'll probably end up finishing the book. Those aren't dry stories. You know, they're about people that you want to be like. And number two, you can start to filter your thought process and your decision making through their thought process and decision making. And you can sort of discover those things through books. So those are kind of the two things that I recommend people start with.
It's so golden. And again, that's reading with a purpose. I love that framework of like, okay, now I'm through your lens, I'm solving problems because you've kind of given me the blueprint. Which, by the way, reminds me, I still got to shoot my favorite book. And I'm dying to hear what your favorite book is. Maybe you don't have one, but I would love to hear maybe like top 3. But, you know, mine, I'll put it out there and I'll shoot a video for you. It's The Millionaire Fastlane by MJ DeMarco. And I guess part of it is because it's like now when I'm looking at businesses, I'm using his framework. Like that's directly from the book. I didn't get it anywhere else. It was literally from his book. And real quick plug, it's sense, control, entry, need, time, and scale, right? Can you have those in any business that you start? So now it's kind of ingrained. And to be honest, I talk about it with my buddies. It's like, I like, there's gotta be, like before this book, I wish I had read this book, like I swear 7 years ago, I always say that. And I just know that there's so much more out there, Nick, that I'm going to be thinking the exact same when I read it, maybe like a year or 2 years from now, that I'm like, I got to go get it. Like there's something out there that I don't know. And I just think that's fascinating. I think you're obviously, I don't know how you do it because I feel like you have gold. You're sitting on like gold right behind you right now as we're speaking. And
I feel the same way.
Yeah. So how do I think you covered that. That's really cool. So you kind of talked about like purposeful reading and behavioral change, which I know is like one of your core values. I know there's a fun fact out there of how much one should read, right? Like how much the average CEO reads and all that stuff. How, you know, if I'm looking to put this into my life, you know, you talked about being interested in what you read. Is there any other tips that you would give folks, or I'm sure folks have asked you, I'm like, how are you reading all these books, that you would maybe a seed that you want to plant and leave with our listeners that maybe could get them to maybe read a little bit more?
Mm-hmm. Well, I really believe sort of that decades in today's thing is important as well, because you can take 30 years of somebody's lessons. That means they're looking back with hindsight, clarity, and analyzing the last 30 years of decisions that they made, what worked and what didn't work. And then they're also creating frameworks for their decision making. You know, now that they're educated and they're making money, or they're super healthy, or they have fantastic communication with other people, they're trying to help other people. They're trying to make a positive dent in the world by accelerating that for you. Instead of going through that process yourself, you can now accelerate that process by reading a book, implementing that kind of thing. And so for me, that all comes down to implementation. Real learning requires behavior change. It's not enough to just read a book and then move on to the next one and then move on to the next one. You need to expand your experience with each book by implementing those lessons, reflecting on those lessons. And so for me, I really believe no matter what problem you're facing, any issue that you have in life, there is a book that can help you make progress towards that solution. There really is, because, you know, human beings, we're all very, very unique. We're all extremely unique, actually, but we face a lot of the same problems, and those problems have been faced by other people, and people have written about them. And I believe that at my core, that there's a book to solve almost every problem.
Absolutely. No, I love that one. It's like giving me the goosebumps. I'm like, damn, like there's really no excuse, especially in this day and age. Like it's out there. Or I think there's another, I think, is it maybe Will Smith said this, is like there's not there, I think, or maybe this was in Paulo Coelho and what's the book?
The Alchemist.
The Alchemist, maybe, which is one of my favorites as well. It's a like there isn't a problem out there that someone hasn't had to face, right? Like whatever problem you're dealing with, like someone has probably had worse. And like even knowing that is like, oh wow, like there's a solution to this. So that's fascinating. I guess for you, like Nick, if you're, is there a way, I guess the way I'm trying to frame this is, if I'm struggling with trying to gain traction, should I be going deep or should I go broad? And look, maybe it all depends, but I'm just thinking for myself, maybe I'll put myself out there. One thing I'm really studying, and probably when we got to meet each other, is probably like funnels, like in my business, just really understanding the mind psychology and stuff like that, and being able to give a lot of market value. So that's something I'm going really deep on. So I'm going in a few deep stuff, but then I'm also reading like, like books on either the, my psyche and my meditation and stuff like that. And so is there a right or wrong way, or maybe one that you would advise one should maybe just go deep on the current goal that they're going, and then also not be just single-mindedly focused on that, maybe read a little bit on like politics, or maybe read a little bit on history? Like what's your thought process on that to make ourselves, again, going back to our core values, whole individuals within, our lab, I guess?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't know that there's one magic answer, but my perspective is that for a lot of people, if you're at the stage in your life where you really desire something different than what you currently have, meaning there's a big distance between where you are today and where you want to be, then you should replace a lot of low impact activity with reading and discovery and reflection and implementation. And so I tell people you can go deep and you can read a lot at the same time if you're willing to spend a couple hours a day in this world, this reading world, this personal development world. Now, if you're not willing to do that, then I would recommend going deep on a couple things that can really change your life. What are the 20% of areas of your life that you could improve that would lead to 80% of the change, and really go deep on those? So in your business right now, maybe it's funnels, really go deep on the funnels. But if you are not disciplined, but motivated enough, maybe you're hurting so much that you're like, I am willing to give up the Netflix and the nights out. I am willing to give up all other social media other than Nick's Bookstagram account.
Plug.
Then
BookThinkers.
At BookThinkers. Then really you could do both. And I tell people all the time, I do both. I read with purpose on the things that I need to accomplish. I also read in preparation for my podcast, but I also read for pleasure. People are like, well, there's no way you're actually spending enough time in those books. And I'm like, yeah, I am. I spend a massive amount of my time reading and implementing these things. So I think there's a little bit of both in there for me.
Gotcha. So let's get a little tactical just for the sake of doing this. I'm a nerd. I try to, again, absorb as much as I can and then implement it. And we proudly say that. Proudly, when I say I'm a nerd, a proud nerd. And so
me too.
Me too. So one of the most fascinating talks that it's funny, I should connect you with Jordan Harry for paying attention to this. We're gonna have a snippet go out to you. You guys got to connect because he's one of the other guys where I connected with him because I took his speed reading course. And the reason why I'm talking about getting tactical, he talks about retention, very similar to you. And my wish, is if I could literally remember everything, right, from a book, that would be a wish of mine at the top of my list, because I read so much and then you just, oh yeah, I think what book was that from? Or and I think it's in my subconscious mind, but I would still want to recall a little bit more. What I know your team to work on something like that, and this is like a good, I want to throw you an alley-oop because I think it really is important. I have different ways that I do it. I write at the back of my books, but what are some ways that have worked for you? And maybe you can also tell us about your smart retention app that can help someone kind of continue to flex the muscle on what they're actually reading, so that they're implementing it and not just reading it and then forgetting about it.
Sure. Yeah, it's a problem that a lot of people have and that I had as well. We did a poll or a series of polls on Instagram. We found that 94% of my community, which is
Yeah.
all personal development book junkies, 94% of people said that they want to retain and implement more from the books they're reading. So it's a very common problem.
Yeah.
And when you analyze the science that sits behind that, you realize that really repetition leads to retention. If you read a book one time, if you take a couple notes in the back of your book and then you never revisit them, then over time, the likelihood that you're able to recall it, find where it's stored in your brain, and then spit it out or apply it to a situation, as time progresses, the likelihood that that's going to happen goes down. But if you revisit that information frequently enough, then you'll be able to retain it. You only remember what you think about. Repetition leads to retention.
Yeah.
And so for a long time, I was taking notes. I was putting them in an Evernote document. And so I was rewriting them, which is great because that's practice. That's revisiting your notes in the first place. And then I would sort of at a leisurely schedule, go back and reread those notes. And I was finding that the more often I was rereading these notes, the more likely I was able to retain them. And also the more likely that my subconscious was identifying opportunities to implement what I learned. So it's kind of like, I found the magic sauce. I need to review this information more frequently, but that's not an easy message to convey to everybody. And so we have this first version of the BookThinkers Smart Retention app right now, and it allows you to put your top 10 takeaways from each book into the app. So there you go. It's organized. Every single book you read, not in a bunch of different random books, but all in one place. And then you can turn on systematic reminders. And so up front, you're going to get hit with a couple notifications. Hey, come back and reread these book notes right after you finished reading it. You're really strengthening those neural pathways and making your relationship to that information a default. And so when we talk about real estate, investing in multifamily real estate, right? I know what books I've read on real estate, and that can come up really quickly because I'm revisiting it all the time. Now, over time, if you revisit it a couple times up front, that length, that duration of time that you're able to remember and retain it and implement it expands. And so that spaced repetition starts to grow and grow and grow. And that's what the Book Thinkers framework is all about. We want to help you retain that information and keep it fresh. Yeah. Sometimes you have those big aha moments that create a ton of emotion, but you fail to act on it. Well, don't let that slip. Put it in the app, get reminded about it a couple more times, and then maybe it's the perfect scenario, perfect environment for you to take advantage of the information, and boom, here you are a year later implementing that information, whereas you never would have otherwise. And so that's kind of the high level for what the app does and why it's been super valuable for me.
So in other words, out of sight, out of mind, right? You're I think one of the unique propositions of the app is that it's popping up in your face of, hey, reminder, which I think is key. No, that's really cool, man. So I definitely wanted to ask you this because I want to, and this may be a personal question. I don't know if you've seen the video how to read a book in one day by Ty Lopez or the TED Talk.
I've seen a bunch of I've seen some good Ty Lopez videos.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is that what would you say to someone who's thinking like, okay, I got to cover volume? Is that something you've looked at to like sharpen in your toolbox to actually increase the speed that you're reading or scanning? Or maybe, I know really how to read a book a day is not reading it word for word a day. Do you have any tips like that, like going straight to the table of contents? Like what are some of those things that I think could help individuals who are really trying to like get this whole reading thing down pat?
So I've done some speed reading as well, and I'm a fan of certain types of speed reading. I know that Jim Quick has this amazing analogy where he says that if you're driving in a car and you're going really slow, it's very easy to lose sight of the road. You can pay attention to the houses, you could start looking at mailboxes, you could read other license plates, you might be singing a song, you start to daydream. That's because you're not using your brain's capacity. And so I'm actually an advocate of reading faster because if you read super slow, you'll get distracted. Reading faster is like driving a car and whipping around corners. You can't focus on mailboxes or license plates when you're really behind the wheel going fast. And so it's kind of the same thing with reading. Our brains have this capacity to do so many more words per minute than we're giving ourselves credit for. And so I like to read fast. And some of those tips about removing the subvocalization and reading with your subconscious, there's a lot of benefit to doing that. I like to enjoy my reading, and so I read a little bit slower than that, and I do sub-vocalize. But I'm a big fan of speed. I don't have any tips around reading the first and last sentence of each chapter or anything like Ty Lopez recommends, but I am an advocate of reading faster than the average person reads.
Yeah. No, I really like that analogy. That's a really good one. So let's get into the keeping it real segment. All right, we talked about the most important piece of real estate being your mind, but let's dive into some real estate, man. I think you started getting into it a little bit as well, and you said a little bit, but I said a lot of it. But tell us about the actual real estate. What that experience was like. I think we talked about you maybe partnering with a few folks in your network.
Yeah, I had a couple old colleagues reach out and they said, "Hey, are you a fan of Bigger Pockets?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And they said, "Okay, great. We would like to put together a little real estate group that invests in multifamilies." They were looking for people in their 20s. Again, my former colleagues, looking for people in their 20s with a little bit of disposable income that understand the principles of delayed gratification, that are also interested in multifamily real estate already. And the whole idea was that, it's kind of tough to put this together by yourself if you're not somebody who's dedicated to real estate. So let's get a group of people together, sort of delegate the different sets of responsibilities as far as prospecting properties, learning the legal implications, putting together the actual business entity, executing on the documentation as we go through the process, learning all about inspections, learning about the closing process. And so that's what we did. We put, I think the first property, 6 people together, all with varying levels of initial investment. And we formed an LLC. And then we purchased our property. And so it was a really fun process for me to go through that. It was my very first experience. And now that the framework is in place, I sort of understand the mechanics of how it works. And so now the idea is to start doubling the portfolio, the number of properties that we're investing in each year, housing each one under its own separate business entity to sort of mitigate liability and also open up opportunity for additional investors. And that's where I'm at. And so, I was that guy with a little bit of extra disposable income, with a little bit of interest in real estate, but not enough time to dedicate myself to it. And so that's what happened.
So who put this deal together? This is very interesting. Like, did someone was it one of your peers or did someone spearhead this whole thing, or was it collective? I'm sorry, I think I missed that, Nick.
Yeah, no, it's okay. A former coworker of mine. And so he was in finance and accounting.
Yeah.
He was house hacking himself. So he purchased a duplex, living on half of it, actually split the other unit up. And so 4 separate contracts, was able to get more money out of it. And he's like, "Hey, I'm living for free. This is awesome." But that was quite the process to go through it myself. I'd like to sort of, delegate. I'd like to get other people involved. And I know that bigger properties have bigger margins potentially. And so he wanted to accelerate that process. And he thought, let's get some other like-minded people in the room, which is sometimes tough to do when you're in your 20s, but that's what he did. And he's a big friend of mine, great friend of mine.
That's a really good friend to have. Seriously, because you need that. We were talking about mastermind earlier. We need people to kind of show us the way sometimes. And how many units was that, Nick?
It was a 4-unit, 8-bed, 4-unit. Yeah. Right in the town that he lives in. So we're able to cut property management costs to have him manage it.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating, man. We love those stories. That's really good, man. That's really inspiring as well. Look, I don't want to let this serendipity go to waste, my man, because we got you in here. We have, Plug to obviously invested talent who puts all of our content together. That's my team. And we aspire to be, like a guy or we even help our clients as well, build platforms like you have, and you've done such a phenomenal job. It certainly was not overnight. So I definitely want to talk about your platform that you've done such a fantastic job of building. And again, I happen to benefit from it because I came across it. We started to connect, and now our audience can benefit from it. So how important has, social media been for you in your business?
It's been extremely valuable. I mean, social media holds a lot of potential for a lot of different people. I think every business should be a social media business. And for book thinkers, I mean, I was able to get out there in the community very early on and engage with tons and tons and tons of people, ask questions, see what people thought would be valuable content, and then start to create that content and expand the audience. And nowadays, like you're talking about, when you release a product or you want to put on a podcast, if you have an audience, it's very valuable to those people. And so, we have the mobile application. We're putting that out to thousands and thousands of people. We have the podcast. I can use my audience to get great guests, but then I can also push that podcast out to a lot of people and help a lot of people. And so it's all about impact for me. The larger your social audience, the larger impact you can have.
Absolutely, and that indeed you are having. And if you don't mind, I know you had mentioned this before, but I don't want, you're so humble. I mean, you're reaching tons of people. I mean, I think you have about 90,000 plus followers on Instagram. Was Instagram the main platform that kind of got you up and running?
Facebook was at first, and then we pivoted quickly over to Instagram. And so we got a couple thousand fans on Facebook very early on, and then I pivoted right over to Instagram, kind of started it from scratch, but found a lot more value in the Instagram platform. Yeah. And so, now we have about 90,000 people on the BookThinkers page, and we're doing over 1 million impressions a week. And I'm also using that platform to connect with a lot of really interesting people. And so that's kind of one of the biggest for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad I'm honored you took the time to sit with us here in the lab, and I'm so glad that we were able to connect. One last thing that I'll say is you mentioned that you went to the marketplace, you asked them what would be of value to them. I think that's really important for people to hear, or even I bring to light to them, because sometimes I feel people are just pumping out noise that isn't serving any purpose. What did that process look like for you? I mean, is it as simple like, hey, like who would be willing to listen to my book review? Like what did that look like for you to get market feedback?
Yeah, it's A/B testing. So seeing what people engage on passively, but then it's also interviewing the audience. And so Instagram's great. You can put polls up on your story, see what people like. You can put up question boxes, have people type in recommendations. I've changed my feed dozens of times over the last 2 years. The different kinds of content that I'm distributing, I'm polling people to see what they want and trying out new pieces of content. And so, also having a business profile, you can sort of see the analytics. And so you can see using real numbers, what's working and what's not working as far as engagement and participation and reach. And so, I love taking the ego, putting it aside, being very vulnerable, saying to the audience, and I used to do this when I only had 1,000, 2,000 followers all the time. Like people are probably tired of me asking for recommendations, but what do you want to see? And I didn't even do video content for the longest time. I mean, the first 6 months that BookThinkers was on Instagram, at least, I never even put my face on a story or on the feed. And so people said, who's the person behind the account? I want to see more of that. And every once in a while I got on the story, and then that morphed into, I want to see more of this kind of content, do video book reviews. And I tried it out, and then voila, that's what people actually wanted to see. So you got to be vulnerable, and you got to ask the audience, what do you want to see?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, we want to see more, man. We want to see more of what you're doing. We can't thank you enough for stepping into the lab. It's funny because I felt like I was in your lab because I'm looking at all those books. I'm like, damn, gotta get some shelves up in here, man. But no, this was great, Nick. So genuine. I gotta ask you this, man. I left the best for last. You thought you were gonna get away, man. You thought you were gonna get away. I'm not.
Thought I was out. I was running to dinner.
Yeah, you're like dashing out. No, man. What is your favorite book, Nick?
Such a hard question. I'll pick 5. I have to do it, but I'll rattle them off. I won't elaborate too much on them because, by the way, time flew by today. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad, first book I ever read. I have to give a lot of credit to that book. It literally changed my life. Right up behind it, The Compound Effect. Small steps in the right direction over a long period of time. It's basically my anthem at this point in life. Right?
Absolutely.
I really love The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. I love to travel physically, internationally, whatever. And that book allowed me to create a remote lifestyle for myself. I love The Go-Giver by Burg and John David Mann. It's a book about the reciprocal relationship between giving and receiving. And oftentimes as go-getters, we forget about the giving part. And as people who are trying to give, we forget about it, receiving gifts sometimes.
Nick, you don't forget, my brother.
Yeah.
And I don't forget either who the givers are, because I know I got a book sitting in my New York place that you sent my way, which I appreciate.
Absolutely.
So we'll give Evan Carmichael a shout out for that. But
shout out Evan, great mentor of mine. And last book, Vagabonding by Rolf. It's one a lot of people don't know about.
I don't know about it.
Real quick, you would love this analogy. It is a book about traveling, physically getting up and going to other countries. But there's this beautiful line in the book where he says, be a Columbus to whole new continents within yourself. Allow yourself to change, explore what's going on the inside. And that's that other piece of real estate that we were talking about before.
Should I drop the mic, or should you should drop the mic, man? Drop the mic.
Pick up the Yeti and throw it on the
Nick, man, thank you, sir. That's a good, man. You got me on those last two, and whoever who's listening, we'll have those on the show notes. If you're driving around, don't worry about it. Keep your hands on the wheel. We'll have those. And Nick, thank you so much for stepping in the lab. Again, where can people find out more about you if they are not on your social, if they don't know about your app, where can we connect with Nick and his team?
BookThinkers.com and on Instagram at BookThinkers. Those are the best places to find me. And I'm very responsive. You can hit me with a DM. I might not hit you back with a voice note. Ruben and I kind of have that on lock, but I'm always answering DMs every couple days. I make sure I get to every single one of them. So feel free to ask me questions, additional recommendations, whatever you need. I'm here to help.
He's a giver, y'all. And just like that, we are out.